In every era, civilizations have believed they were ruled by kings, presidents, parliaments, and governments. People trusted the faces on television, the voices behind podiums, and the symbols of authority printed on flags. But while nations argued, voted, and fought, a quieter force worked behind the curtain, one that never campaigned, never debated, never appeared on any ballot. A force that did not need power, because it already owned it. He observed patterns the public never noticed. Whenever a nation collapsed, whenever a war erupted, whenever an economy suddenly shifted, the same invisible fingerprints appeared. The media called them coincidences, analysts called them market reactions, and governments called them unexpected developments. But he saw something else: orchestration, timing, intention. The Shadow Council did not meet in public halls or lavish palaces. They gathered where records could not reach and laws could not follow. They were not one group, but a network: ultra-wealthy dynasties, multinational conglomerates, intelligence veterans, digital barons, financial architects, and geopolitical brokers who shared only one common mission: shape the world before the world shaped them. Their power was not loud. It did not shout, march, or demand attention. It whispered, it nudged, it redirected. While nations made headlines, the council moved in silence. It was never about controlling governments. It was about owning the conditions in which governments operated. He learned that the greatest illusion in modern society was the belief that elected leaders ruled the world. Presidents served 4 or 8 years. Prime ministers rotated like actors on a stage. But the council's members remained for decades, sometimes generations. They built systems designed not to be noticed, and for that reason, they never needed to hide. People simply looked in the wrong direction. The council's influence began where ordinary power ended. They did not pressure governments. They made governments dependent. A nation drowning in debt listened. A nation lacking resources obeyed. A nation isolated by conflict complied. This was not conspiracy, it was leverage. And leverage was the currency of the Shadow Council. They observed the world like a chessboard. Every country a piece, every crisis a move, every resource a square. But unlike chess, this game had no opponent. The public saw chaos, but he recognized choreography. Global events did not unfold, they were engineered. Not always directly, not always intentionally, but always in ways that benefited the same clusters of power. He discovered something even more unsettling. The council did not need to agree to act in unison. Their interests aligned naturally. When energy markets shifted, they profited. When political instability rose, they positioned themselves. When nations fell into conflict, they expanded, and so the world danced to the rhythm of incentives crafted by people who would never feel the consequences of their decisions. The most extraordinary part: they were not villains, not heroes, not prophets. They were engineers. Engineers of influence, engineers of dependency, engineers of global outcomes. He realized that the world was not controlled, it was steered. Slowly, subtly, predictably. And then he discovered the truth that shook him most. Governments were not weak because the council was strong. Governments were weak because they were designed that way. As he pieced together their operations, patterns emerged. Markets moving before announcements. Conflicts appearing where resources surged. Leaders replaced when they stepped out of alignment. Public outrage manufactured with digital precision. None of this required secrecy. It required structure. Systems that rewarded those who followed the hidden incentives and punished those who didn't. The Shadow Council did not create the world's problems. They simply learned to monetize them. He realized the council's greatest strength was not their wealth, technology, or reach. Their greatest strength was public distraction. As long as people fought each other left versus right, nation versus nation, race versus race, generation versus generation, they would never notice the hand guiding the chaos. He knew the world would not change until people learned to look beyond the surface. Not at the conflict, but at the beneficiaries of the conflict. Not at the decision, but at the incentive behind the decision. Not at the leader, but at the structure that placed the leader there. The council's power was not a mystery. It was a mirror, a reflection of a world where attention was the rarest commodity and control belonged to whoever commanded it. He realized that the Shadow Council's influence was not built on secrecy, but on structure. The world did not need to believe they existed. The world only needed to behave exactly as they expected. And that was the terrifying brilliance of their design. They never forced humanity to obey. Humanity obeyed itself, while nations shouted about freedom, independence, and self-determination. The Council quietly shaped the invisible architecture beneath every decision: supply chains, energy routes, digital platforms, global loans, trade agreements, surveillance systems, and dependency loops so subtle that even experts could not see where they began. To the untrained eye, world events looked chaotic. But he understood something deeper. Chaos was not a failure of the system. Chaos was the system. He documented patterns. When regions became too stable, too confident, or too united, instability emerged like a sudden storm. Markets dipped. Political factions clashed. Old wounds reopened. He once thought these events were natural until he learned that stability was dangerous to those who profited from volatility, and volatility was the Council's playground. They did not create conflict directly. They simply aligned incentives so that conflict became profitable, predictable, and unavoidable. When nations clashed, defense contracts soared. When currencies collapsed, financial sharks feasted. When panic spread, media engagement skyrocketed. When populations argued, the Council moved unnoticed. He saw that the Council didn't control governments, they controlled what governments feared: a collapsing currency, a manipulated election cycle, a sudden shortage, a targeted leak, an exposed scandal. Not fabrication, just timing. They never pushed. They only removed guardrails, and human nature did the rest. He discovered that every global crisis had two stories: the story the world heard, and the story engineered beneath it. Nations explained crises through speeches. The Council explained them through spreadsheets. He studied financial movements the way historians studied ancient texts. Money, after all, was the most honest narrator because money did not lie. It simply flowed toward power. He found that before every major political shift, wealth moved like migrating birds. Before every major conflict, assets repositioned. Before every destabilizing event, liquidity surged into the same hidden channels that led to the same families, the same institutions, the same digital entities controlling the world's critical infrastructure. The Council did not need to meet in dark rooms or exchange secret signals. The global system itself was their meeting room. Energy giants aligned unknowingly with intelligence networks. Tech monopolies aligned unknowingly with defense contractors. Financial titans aligned unknowingly with geopolitical strategists. Every entity acted in its own self-interest, yet somehow always reinforced the Council's invisible blueprint. It was an ecosystem, self-correcting, self-strengthening, and self-protecting. He realized the horror. The Shadow Council was not a conspiracy, it was an emergent phenomenon, a natural outcome of concentrated wealth, digitized influence, and global dependency. A structure so integrated into the world that removing it would collapse everything built upon it. He understood why no government ever defeated them. You cannot overthrow an ecosystem. Meanwhile, ordinary people debated the wrong battles. Left versus right, rich versus poor, urban versus rural, traditional versus modern. But the Council operated above ideology. They did not care who won elections, they cared who controlled logistics. They did not care who ruled nations, they cared who owed the debt. They did not care who shaped public opinion, they cared who owned the infrastructure that delivered it. The real battle was never between political parties. It was between attention and manipulation, between perception and reality, between the world people thought they lived in and the world the Council actually engineered. He witnessed a pattern repeated across continents. A crisis erupts. People panic. Governments react. Media amplifies. Corporations capitalize. The council grows stronger. The world believed that technology made people freer, that he realized technology made people predictable. Every post tracked, every fear mapped, every desire recorded, every weakness analyzed. Predictability was the council's greatest weapon, because when people can be predicted, they can be steered, not through force, through suggestion. He saw governments chasing public approval while the council shaped public emotion. He saw experts debating symptoms while the council engineered conditions. He saw citizens demanding answers while the council refined illusions. The council's power was so profound because it felt normal, familiar, invisible, like gravity. And then he learned the most disturbing truth. The council's end goal was not domination. It was stability, the kind of stability that benefits those already at the top, even if it suffocates everyone else. Stability through controlled tension. Stability through managed chaos. Stability through endless dependency. As long as the world believed chaos was accidental, the council remained unchallenged. As long as the world believed freedom